Welcome back. You're watching Global Eye with me, Parikshit Luthra. How will global trade be impacted by the Ukraine-Russia war? With us right now is the WTO Director General, Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala. Ma'am, thank you so much for joining us here on CNBC-TV18. Let me begin by asking you for your outlook for trade in 2023. Are we going to see a slowdown in global trade?
Well, thank you for having me, Parikshit. And let's just say this. The projections we had for global trade saw a considerable slowdown from 2022 to 2023. We projected that for 2022, global trade, merchandise trade, would grow by about 3.5%, coming down to 1% for 2023. So that's a considerable slowdown. However, we have seen that the IMF, the World Bank, and others have slightly revised the outlook for global GDP. Things are looking, I would not say they are looking good, they are looking less bad. So we have a revision from 2.7 to 2.9% for global GDP this year. We are so looking at our trade numbers also, and we hope to have a revised number by April. And since recession does not seem to be, the recessionary pressures seem to be receding a bit, hopefully we'll have a slightly better number for global trade.
Right. I would like to ask you about the mood in the room when you were there at the G20 foreign ministers meeting. Was there tension? Was there consensus that the economic impact of the war needs to be mitigated? We need to have resilient supply chains. Do you think there was consensus, or did the divisions over the war put everything on the back burner?
No, first let me start by congratulating India on the G20 presidency and a very well-run meeting, very impressive. And I think the atmosphere in the room, yes, there was tension given the war in Ukraine, but there was also remarkable consensus about the things that matter. The fact that multilateralism needs to be strengthened and is the way to go. The fact that we cannot solve today's global problems. The crisis, the polycrisis we're going through, be it for the pandemic, which, by the way, has not completely receded, the war in Ukraine, the high energy prices, high food prices, climate change, the existential threat of climate change, all need a multilateral solution. And so in the room, there was that agreement. Now, there was also a push for peace. Almost every delegation wants a solution to the war. And so that was like something of a uniting theme. And I think there was agreement that developing countries are really being impacted by these multiple crises. We need to solve the debt situation that they're in. We need to create more fiscal space for poorer countries, and developed countries need to be able to assist to get these things done. So it was a good atmosphere, I thought. Of course, there were a few sharp edges in terms of demands from Russia to come to the table to negotiate. But I would say all in all, it was a constructive atmosphere.
Right. How important is to continue with the Black Sea Grain Initiative?
I think the Black Sea Grain Initiative is crucial. It's
the reason why I asked, because we believe that several of the G7 countries pressed upon Lavrov to come to an agreement on that.
They did. There was the pressure to continue with the Black Sea Grain Initiative. Russia, I think, made its points known. I think Russia wants to see its own goods also evacuated. And I think they made that point. But I think the key point being made is, look, if we cannot continue this initiative, it will have an impact on many countries, poor countries everywhere, because they depend on the Black Sea region for grains and for fertilizer, which is, in a way, very, very important. 35 countries from Africa, as a matter of fact, import either food or fertilizer from the Black Sea region. So you can imagine, if we don't keep the corridors open, that's going to have a devastating impact. The World Food Programme says there are almost 350 million people who are food insecure. So we need to keep this open, and I hope there will be a pathway towards continuing this initiative, which both Turkey and the Secretary General of the UN have worked really hard to to keep going.
Right. I'd like to talk to you about deliberations on e-commerce rules at the WTO. India wants a pause. They want more deliberations at the WTO before coming to an agreement. What is the current status?
I think the current status is pretty reasonable. There are two tracks on e-commerce at the WTO. You have the multilateral track that is dealing with the e-commerce moratorium, the moratorium on on not taxing electronic transmissions. So that's the multilateral track. Everybody is involved. You also have a plurilateral track where you have about 86 countries that are negotiating an e-commerce agreement on a plurilateral basis, meaning not every single member is there, but a huge number are there. Now, both tracks are proceeding well. On the multilateral track, India has put out some thinking and some papers. The idea is to think through what would the impact of the further development of digital trade really mean for developing countries. How do they benefit from it? How do they get revenues from it? What about the data? What about privacy? Who controls data flows? What are the rules that should govern this? So there are some very interesting and important questions. And India and the other members, not just India, want to have a work program that will try to sort out some of these issues before coming to a final conclusion. That work program is moving along, I think, well. There is, a good discussion among the members about how this work should be done. On the plurilateral track, the negotiations are moving at pace. Soon they'll be looking at cross-border data flows. But I just want to say one of the problems for developing countries is some of them, there are two things, the digital divide. Some do not have the infrastructure, and many do not have the regulatory framework. So they feel hesitant, and you can understand it, to participate in these discussions. So we must invest in them. We must build their capacity and help them so they are not left behind.